All right. Welcome to the first interview episode of Stream of Consciousness on this channel in 2020. Greetings from the Dark Continent. Conscious Caracol here, or Adams Van Zyl, whatever you prefer. And tonight I'm talking to Jeremy Nell, the infamous or famous, whatever perspective you're looking at it from, cartoonist in South Africa. And we're just going to talk about anything but the virus. Welcome on the show, Jeremy.
It's a great pleasure to be here, and it's actually nice to be on a show that I'm not hosting.
Well, a lot of South African YouTubers are actually getting into the groove of getting their stream game up to the next level. I see Ronaldo is pumping out content almost on a daily basis. Roman's also getting on there. I think it's actually quite healthy for the alternative media scene in South Africa. I think you'll agree.
Yeah, I know, it's brilliant. In fact, the more, the merrier. I think we need even more people doing it. And, you know, it's so important in the battle of ideas.
It really, what it does is it actually gives to the average person, well, an average person like me, the platform where I can put my opinions out there. If people don't like what I have to say, they don't have to tune in. That's the beauty about the internet, and the beauty of the free market is that it just gives people that freedom of, if you don't like what Jeremy Nell says, or you're absolutely infuriated about what he says, isn't it horrible that the government mandates that you have to follow Jerm on Twitter?
You know, it's terrible. And I feel so sorry for those people who have a gun pointed at their head, you know, as they type in the URL to go to my stream to watch it and sit through that trauma.
Yes, man, it's absolutely infuriating that people are put in this position. But anyway,
but you know, jokes aside as well. But jokes aside, isn't it amazing how, I don't know, 20 years ago, right, this wouldn't really have been possible. I mean, it would have been possible, but it would have been very complicated and expensive.
Right.
Now we can do this. We can share ideas on the internet to a potentially massive audience, and it's so cheap in comparison, you know, to the big budgets that broadcasting studios had a few decades ago.
Right, and I think this is it's just going to get cheaper and easier. I mean, this, you don't even have to. You use the example of going back 20 years. I think I would even say going back 5 or 6 years. This is already miles ahead or light years ahead of what the type of technology we had back in the day. And I think just this, it just gives a platform to regular people. And like I said, in this internet free market, this absolute like wild west, I mean, we're pioneers in that regard. This wild west of the internet, you are not guaranteed an audience. You can pump out content on a daily basis. If you don't have something to say or something that at least a few people find interesting, literally 0 people could be listening to your stream. So I think this is what makes
it. But that's also beautiful, because you can have 0 people listening or watching your stream, but it stays on YouTube. Sorry, I did interrupt you. I didn't mean to.
No, it's
but
fine.
It stays there, and people can watch it later.
That's what I like about it. That's what I like about the internet, is that type of almost Wild West element to it, where you are not guaranteed an audience. You are not guaranteed success. It all depends on what you have to say and what content you put out there. And I think you've experienced it now that you've dipped your toe into the YouTube scene as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment, because I don't know, a year ago, just before I started, or maybe just over a year ago, I didn't really want to do this. I mean, I draw political cartoons, political satire for a living, and you know, my face stays hidden. You know, my logo online is a pink bunny, and you know, and people hopefully know me by my signature, and maybe my views, but not my face. And so putting myself into the YouTube space also makes me more vulnerable and more accountable. It's an interesting balancing act.
So here, the one of the first comments I'm going to highlight for tonight is a Sideliner Opinion says, Jerm has a permanent stalker giving a dislike before he starts speaking.
Every single video, even before it starts, before I start any live streams, there are guaranteed 2 dislikes.
But see, here's the interesting thing. They're actually playing themselves, because how the YouTube algorithm works, it's not based on how positive the feedback is on your video. It's about how much feedback there is in total. So a dislike counts as activity. So the dislikes are actually helping the video. It counts. It has this exact same weight as a like to the algorithm. The YouTube algorithm just cares about interaction, whether that be a comment saying, "Oh, Jerm, your video was terrible," or a dislike. That's still counting in your favor. So they're actually playing themselves.
Yeah, but and here's the thing: I'm not really tuned into the tech stuff. I probably do everything wrong when it comes to my own stream. I don't promote it really in terms of like, I don't do the whole like, guys, please click the like button and click the subscribe and notifications and the bell and all that kind of. I don't do any of that stuff. I don't know if it's correct or wrong, whatever. But I'm more interested in just having that conversation.
Right. And Dagbreker, very succinct point there. He says that just proves that people are much more intelligent than what scripted television assumes. And I completely agree. I think,
definitely.
I definitely think the average consumer, in terms of people that watch our shows, people that watch just consume internet content that isn't just cat videos. I think the mainstream media and the people behind corporate media houses are underestimating the how easily a person will realize that they're being exploited or that they're being talked down to. I mean, I think the average person realizes when an opinion piece starts with "dear fellow white people," they're going to say, please, screw you, I'm not going to even read this. But anyway,
or let's go even further up. If it starts with news24.com.
Well, I don't want to be promoting fake news, seeing as that's a crime now, so I'm not going to comment there. So, Jeremy, just on a more personal note, how did you become a cartoonist? What put you on this life path? I mean, this is not something every South African can just say, like, "Oh man, I considered becoming a cartoonist."
It's actually a wonderful question, because I don't. The funny thing is, I actually never talk about what I do. So it's great that you've asked that. Okay. Let's start years ago. I have always loved drawing cartoons. From when I was going to church as a little kid, I would draw in the Bible and get into trouble for that. And I've always just loved cartoons. Whether it's in actual fact, Bugs Bunny and the Warner Brothers TV cartoons were my favorite growing up. I loved the Pink Panther, and I loved Asterix and Obelix. And, I just loved the cartoons that everybody of my age group, because I know I'm a little bit older than you, but maybe like 10 years or 8 years or something like that. But everybody in my age group growing up would have loved those cartoons. I really enjoyed the stuff that was considered risque. So, if you don't mind, let me just give you a little bit of context here. So I was always in the sort of the Warner Brothers camp. Walt Disney was what everybody loved. They loved Bambi and all the sort of Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck cartoons. And today I appreciate it and I love it. Then when I was younger, I hated all of that stuff. I preferred the stuff that was edgier. Daffy Duck was a parody of Donald Duck, and there's a whole story as to how he was created. And I loved how the Warner Brothers cartoons and the Pink Panther cartoons and the Popeye and all those kinds of things came out of low budget studios, and
but there's also an element of like mischief or like banter in it.
Yeah. So I mean, like Disney was notoriously high budget, beautiful animation and cartooning, and the Warner Brothers side of things was always the guys who had no money. They were like the punk rockers of the cartoon world at that stage. That was called, and it became the golden era of cartooning. The everyone remembers Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies, and there was that whole series, and they all knew one another, and there was this wonderful rivalry that happened. And I loved all that stuff growing up, and I remember waking up every Saturday morning at just before 7 o'clock, so I could go take my blanket, go lie on the couch and watch KTV on a Saturday morning.
I remember KTV, dude. I'm old enough to remember, dude.
Right. 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock on a Saturday. And I would religiously every Saturday morning watch every cartoon that was on. And they even had
2 p.m. to 5 p.m., I think, or 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. on a weekday.
3 until 5 or something. And I would watch all of that. I loved it. I even had little sort of high school crushes on the female presenters. I remember there was the
The
infamous one,
lamest presenters, dude. The most
Candice.
typical South African presenters ever.
Candice Hillebrand. Everybody had a crush on her, and she was this most wonderful little blonde thing on TV. And man, I loved all of that. And most of my library behind me, although you can't see it here because I've got a lot of serious books, but I mean, I've got a library on this side as well. I have hundreds of books of comics and cartoons. When I say comics, I don't mean superheroes. I've never been into superhero comics. I've been into old school cartooning, like from the 1920s up to the 1970s. I love slapstick Monty Python type humor. I've never been into serious cartooning. I've always been a fan of the very simplistic, minimalistic cartooning. Sorry, I see you're throwing comments on the screen. You're welcome to interrupt me. We can continue with my.
No, man,
monologue.
I'm just giving some people some exposure, dude. But
right,
yeah,
that's no
the
problem.
thing,
So I've if people want to know, I'm doing a Johnny Walker here.
Well, but that's
anyway,
very interesting.
So let me fast forward a little bit because I haven't really answered your question. I'm kind of giving you a history, but I've not answered. So then I did everything else that everybody did. I studied and I went to art school at UCT. I went to the best art school in the country. They only took, I think at that stage, 64 students a year. I was one of them. Somehow I got through because art was the subject I did best at school. So perhaps that added to it. But I failed. I'm a varsity dropout. I did not make it through art school. And the irony is that today I earn a living. I live, and I have for the last 15, 16 years being an artist.
But there was an attempt.
There was an attempt to study it, but I'm so glad that I failed it because I think if I'd gone through art school, I probably would have ended up hating art. And that's the problem with studying art on an academic level, is that you end up hating it because it becomes so academic and clinical that you lose the essence and the feeling of the art. It should never be an academic thing. I mean, think about it. How can somebody give you a mark for art?
No, completely, man. So just to answer one of the questions in the chat, Cornelius Sheck asks, is that a beer mug and do you still have any beer left? I've got one bottle left that I'm saving for a special occasion because this lockdown could last from 1 month extra or 5 years into the future. We don't know. So I'm gonna leave that special thing, that special beer for some occasion in the future. So this is just a fortified water.
It's so funny. Someone's asking Ronaldo a question, but he's not in the stream.
No, he is. He's in the chat.
Oh, is he? How's it, Ronaldo?
I didn't display his comment because his comment is just deliberately trying to go against the grain. But so okay. Quentin Ferreira asked, "Are we master finish?"
I just want to say, Ronaldo is probably, in my opinion, the most important YouTuber in South Africa right now. I don't mean to say that on your channel, but genuinely, Ronaldo is. I mean, he and I are good mates, and we're always having a nice, friendly go at each other. But the guy is really, really doing amazing work, and I really want to just give Ronaldo a high five. He's been at it for over a decade. You know, we haven't, and he deserves all the credit.
Right. Here's an interesting comment that you might completely agree with. Dagbreker says, "This is so true. I know so many people who hate playing piano because the teacher takes the soul out of it."
Yes, and that's exactly correct. You know, I think Dagbreker has nailed it. It's the soul. It's the feeling. It's the energy of the art form. Art is a creative thing. It's not an academic thing. You can study medicine. Okay, you can't. I mean, sure, you can feel it, but you need to study it to understand how it works. Art. I mean, look here. So I was in France last year, and I went to the Palace of Versailles, and you can't understand the beauty of that palace from a book. Right. You just cannot. You have to go and stand in those hallways and look at the majesticness of the painting and the artwork that you see on those walls. It's incredible, and that is something that is just beyond an academic level.
No, absolutely, dude. It's what I think that's where art comes in terms of, and this might be disagreeing with your point, in terms of I think art can really bridge that gap between being present there and seeing it, and doing your best to give someone that impression of what you felt when you saw it.
Exactly. Well, let me just quickly carry on. I know we are doing this in pieces, but let me just carry on my story of how I
sure,
became
man.
a
Go ahead.
cartoonist. And now we can stop again and we can come back to it. But
of course,
what happened was, so I failed, and then I went into sort of the graphic design world, into the sort of the corporate world. I found a job in sort of mobile technology research, and at that stage, there was no such thing as a smartphone. Okay, it was just this sort of Nokia 3310s and stuff. And so I was involved in the creative team, in trying to find ways to communicate mobile technology in a creative way. It's quite difficult to explain now because it's so long ago and it's all very much outdated now. But nevertheless, that's what I did for a few years, and I sat in traffic for 3 hours a day, and I really hated it. But I did it for years, you know. And while I was doing it, I started my own website and I started drawing cartoons again. And I scanned them, and I posted them to my website, and I kind of built a tiny little fan base. And I remember when I got retrenched in 2005, the company was not doing so well anymore. Smartphones were starting to come onto the scene. And I decided, you know what? If Madam and Eve and Zapiro can make it as a cartoonist, maybe I can. And I gave myself about a year to
dream.
Yeah, I dared to dream. I gave myself about a year to 2 years. I stayed with my folks. I'm very embarrassed to say, but hey, I'm also not embarrassed to say, because I used that time to build what I believed in, and I really genuinely believed that I wanted to make a career out of doing what I love. And I made it. You know, about 2 years later. I mean, we're talking. It's a long time. But 2 years of struggling and really, really getting nowhere. I got my first break, and that was with the Sunday Times, and that's where things just kind of.
In what year was this?
That was 2007. So
it's just 3 years ago. Oh wait, no, it's 30.
Yeah, no, exactly. So and that was when I started working. Well, I said the Sunday Times, but the Sunday Times launched a daily paper called The Times, which we now know as Times Live. And I started working with them, and that's where everything just kind of, I grabbed that opportunity. I grabbed it with everything, and I used that to trampoline myself into other publications.
Right. And actually, here's a question that perfectly links to your story. And it's Sideline Opinions who asks, who decides what is good art?
Yeah, but that's exactly right. And, you know, art is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it?
Right. But I mean, it's still a relevant question when it comes to, I mean, you specifically, someone that tried to break into the cartooning scene in South Africa. And I think the majority of people listening to the stream would agree that or even whatever form that cartooning takes is a form of art. But then you have to ask the question, who decides what is good political cartooning and what is bad political cartooning?
The reader. That's the answer. Look, I think there are general... how do I say this? You know, I've got to also be very humble here, which is quite difficult as a satirist, because we satirists are very arrogant and we think that we are correct and everybody else.
There's a humble brag incoming.
Yeah. So like, everybody else is an idiot. Everyone who disagrees with me is a fool. That's how we satirists are. But that's what we're paid to do. We're paid to give an opinion, and the moment you give an opinion, you're assuming that you're correct and everybody else is an idiot. But listen, I mentioned a few minutes ago that I was at the Palace of Versailles last year, and honestly, if anybody ever has the wonderful opportunity to travel to France, for the love of sanity and everything in you, go and visit Versailles, because you will never experience something like that. Well, you might, but you won't experience anything quite like that. And you're going to see art like you've never seen. And yes, where I'm going with this, I could never in my life, never equate myself on an artistic level with that kind of Renaissance beauty. Never. The Sistine Chapel. It's ridiculous to say that it's simply in the eye of the beholder. It is definitely an objective thing to say that art is way beyond anything that I'm capable of doing. I simply draw very basic lines and I color in quite badly. but here's the thing. I get that it's a different kind of art, but it's like comparing jazz to I don't know, to making something on your computer.
To beatboxing.
Yeah, like beatboxing does require a really good skill. There's no doubt about that. But jazz, like real jazz, requires a skill that takes years and years and years.
Right. And I think this transitions perfectly into the other question that I had in terms of we're talking about the quality of art and who decides what is a good piece of art and what's a bad piece of art. But then who decides what is a good piece of political cartooning and what is a bad piece of political cartooning? Because my question then is, why has, from my perspective, the South African political cartooning scene just become so limp and just so lame? And
because
their kneecaps have just been cut off.
Because it has, and I've been saying this for years, so this isn't like revolutionary on my part, but I'm of the opinion that South African political cartooning is crap. And the cartoonists, but I've said this, and the cartoonists hate hearing that because immediately I get messages saying, "Wait, Jerm, are you saying that I'm crap?" And I'm not necessarily, I'm not necessarily pointing out cartoonists. And by the way, Zapiro is by far the greatest cartoonist in modern South African history. There's no doubt about it. I don't agree with a lot of his commentary. Okay, I absolutely do not agree with a lot of his commentary, and I think that he has become very placid in recent years. But that's my opinion. He might not think so, and that's okay. And he's got a large support base, but he's still brilliant. Let's not underestimate this. I will always be Jerm, the cartoonist who lived in Zapiro's shadow, and I know that, and I'm okay with that. But again, I have a different approach to satire. To him, sorry, your comments appearing quite big on the screen now, so I'm being distracted. I rate Jerm as the best cartoonist in SA. His humor in general, though, is so dry, which clearly shows that cartoon humor doesn't translate to a person being funny. Thank you, Ronaldo. I think Ronaldo is just upset because I haven't sent him a coffee mug. But there's a whole big drama around my coffee mug. Sorry, Ronaldo.
You have a coffee mug there to show off to the screen.
Yes. I've got a couple actually. So I've got this one here, a white rhino supremacist. I've got another one. Hang on. Black rhinos can't be racist. and then the other popular one is this one here, politically correct horse. There are more, but unfortunately at the moment I've had issues. I've had issues. So
just to almost preempt some of the questions here in the chat, where can people find these mugs if they want to put them in their home?
They're on my website, jermwarfare.com, and you click on merch. And yes, there is a conspiracy theory going around that I have a pyramid scheme going, and that I simply take people's money and I don't send them mugs.
That's not true. I thought that was true.
most people who have bought mugs from me have received their mugs. There is a minority that hasn't. And I'm trying to fix that, but I can't at the moment with the lockdown. So I've got I was saying this morning on my stream this morning that I've got this great supplier. He does all my mugs for me. He's a wonderful guy, but he's very chilled. He's like a surfer, and he gets things ballsed up. He sent the one person about 3 extra mugs.
I mean, if I was that person, I wouldn't be complaining. But then at the same time, I think that's where a lot of YouTubers are making their money now, is in terms of merchandise, where I think back in the day, you used to make your money out of monetizing your videos. But if you just mention the word once in a stream, then
people get very upset. Yeah. I don't understand that, Ernst. I don't understand. People get so upset when you want to make money. Like, guys, seriously. Okay, hang on. Let me just... I want to rant just a little bit here. Okay.
Yeah, go for it, man. We've got time.
I want to rant, but here's the thing, right? I have spent almost 20 years trying to make a career out of drawing cartoons. I love cartoons, right? It takes a lot of time and effort. I failed art school. I've got to work really hard all the time to be better than my last cartoon, right? Because people judge me accordingly. If I do a series of bad cartoons, I get forgotten about, and I have to remain relevant. But I also have to continue giving my point of view. I've got to give my opinion on issues. That's what I'm being paid for. So this is continual pressure of performing. Okay. And even if things are going really horrible at home, if I'm having a tough time at home, if I've lost a family member, or if I've had an argument with my wife, people don't care. They still want to see a high quality cartoon. Okay. So I have to try and put those emotions into a different spot in my head. And it's very difficult. People don't realize that. I have spent years trying to make a career, okay, out of drawing cartoons. I'm completely a non-essential service. I'm at the bottom end of a food chain. If a company takes a financial strain, I'm the guy that gets chucked first. Why must I do my stuff for free? Seriously. Why do people think I must work for free? Do I not have a bond? I am married. I have to look after my wife. And I've got to compete with my wife because she's highly qualified. I want to be able to live a decent life like everybody else. You know, I just happen to have a job that goes into the public space and everybody can see and comment.
Right. And Ronaldo asks on that topic or on that statement, but doesn't that inspire you to draw a cartoon?
Doesn't what is he referring to?
Well, I think he's referring to that drive of you trying to make a living, trying to provide for your family.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I mean, the last few weeks, I've been the angriest that I've been, I think, in recent years. And I suspect that I'm not alone. I know that a lot of people have been very angry, and we all know why. I've had very, very stupid arguments with family and friends that I normally wouldn't have. I have a feeling that people in the comments can relate, that they've also been arguing over this thing that's been happening at the moment. The reality is that it's caused a lot of stress and it's triggered a lot of unnecessary emotions. I've tried to tap into that as best as I can, though, in my work.
And I would just like to take a little moment to thank everyone for tuning in. Really, the chats, the level of banter in the chat's been always top grade, but I think that's what I've been expecting from my streams.
I just want to say I dissed you a little bit earlier by saying that Ronaldo's got the most important channel in the country, but I do think that your channel now, hopefully, if you keep it regular and don't drop it like you did, will also become critically important, and hopefully that we can all be part of this network that's currently growing.
Yeah. So on that note of how your career affects your own psyche and your worldview, but maybe more of an abstract question. What do you think is the role of the political cartoonist or the jester or the comic in society?
That question I have been asked so many times over the years, not just me, Zapiro. Cartoonists all over the world have been asked that question. It's an eternal question. No one knows the answer to it. What is the role? Let me answer it from my perspective.
Yet every society has jesters and cartoonists and comics.
Correct. So let me try and answer it from my perspective, because I can only answer it from that perspective. And that is this. I didn't look at the industry years ago and go, that will be my role, so I must try and fit into that role. My position was simply, yes, I love this. In fact, when I started, I had no idea that I was going to go into politics. I really had no political sway. I didn't know anything about politics. I could probably tell you the president was, but that was it. I had no interest whatsoever. It was my editor at that stage, Ray Hartley, who said to me, look, why don't you try your hand at making some political commentary? You know, if you get it wrong, the worst that can happen is that we fire you. Which is what he said, and I know he was joking, but there was an element of seriousness in it. Like we kind of need political commentary, and we need it to come from people who are jesters. And I kind of started realizing at that stage that people are interested in the opinions of others. They are. That's why we listen to talk radio. That's why we listen to commentators on TV. People do want to know what people think, because they can either relate or they can disagree. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they're willing to pay for that also.
And I think I wanted to say this, but I think Sideliner Opinions has beat me to it. He says here, the cartoonist is the brutally honest conscience of humanity.
I don't know if that's true.
Well, the point that I wanted to make is that if you, and I think, don't think it is the cartoonist specifically. It is the cartoonist, it is the comic, it is the satirist, it is just the regular person that goes out into the public square and makes jokes about the government. It's that type of archetype, that type of person is almost, and I think comics and cartoonists and satirists almost get a license to be brutally honest, where society will give them, and I think this is more in a perfect society. I'm not talking in South Africa. I don't think it works that way. But in a perfect world, they get a license to almost say what everyone else is afraid to say, to joke about what everyone else is afraid to joke about. But they are successful and their work is spread about because everyone is just thinking at the back of their mind without admitting it. Yes, man, this is what I've always just wanted to say, but I've never been able to say it in a way that is this funny or this. I think the humor kind of lessens the blow. It kind of cushions the blow of the message. And I think that's where satire and comedy comes in.
Yeah, but it's weird, I've never considered myself funny ever. In actual fact, I've always seen myself as kind of serious and, for the most part, angry. I generally am an angry person, and that's because I'm. And it's so weird. I don't mean this. I don't mean this. I don't know how else to say it. I don't mean it, but I'm going to say it. But I often think that people are very stupid. And I know that it's an arrogant thing, and I know it's the wrong thing to say, but I genuinely do think that people are stupid more often than they should be. And I feel that I need to try and mock things, and I'm not quite sure where the humor comes from. Maybe it's from the fact that I'm ridiculing something, and people go, "Oh, you know what? I agree with that." I wasn't quite sure how to agree with that. But since you put it into a picture, now it makes sense. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how the whole humor thing works. I don't sit there thinking, I'm a funny guy. How can I turn this into something funny? I don't think that. And I've never thought to myself as funny. I'm not a comedian. But people tend to laugh, and I'm not sure if the laughter is more of a, that laughter that's an awkward, uncomfortable laughter that people give, and I think it's more
nervous laughter.
Yeah, I think it's more that than a, oh, that was great. I really thought that was a, you know what I mean. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I think it's the type of laughter you get from a comic. Well, I think the one of the best pieces of political cartooning that this country has ever seen was Zapira's cartoon of the rape of justice.
Yeah,
I think that was absolutely groundbreaking. I think that was just the perfect balance between shock value and a message without going too far and actually going into the realm of like disgusting people or actually making people so shocked into that realm where you're so disgusted you miss the message. I think it was the perfect balance. But then you also, like you said, you get into that realm of, I don't think the laughter for that cartoon was a laughter of, haha, that was funny. It was more of a nervous laughter of, haha, well, that's kind of true.
Yeah. I agree, and I think that was a great cartoon. And I think it was on point, and I think that everybody was, there's the thing. Everybody was thinking it. And but remember now, cartoonists can't hit a 6. They can't hit that ball out of the park every single cartoon. That kind of cartoon comes once every few years.
Right. For me, I think Quentin sums it up pretty well. This is the point that I made: is that satirists embody the archetype of the trickster. Like Prometheus, they steal fire from the gods and are bringers of light to consciousness. Super important for a healthy society. And I think that's why I use the word jester. The jester has a very specific role in the king's court. The jester is the only person that is allowed to mock the king. He's almost there to break the tension, so that the king isn't just this sour, old, untouchable figure. He can be touched, but by the jester. Only the jester has the luxury or the privilege of being able to joke about the king, almost humanizing the king. And I think in modern society, the king is the state or the government or the president.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And comedians have that privilege as well. And thankfully, the Constitution does protect satire to a large degree. A friend of mine, Justin Nurse, is a good example of how the Constitution protected him many years ago with the Laugh-It-Off versus SAB court cases.
Oh, right.
And he won. And he won because he was allowed to ridicule corporate branding, and that was very, very important case.
So something that I've seen a lot of people say, I mean, I've been saying it for a while now as well, is that reality cannot compete with satire cannot compete with reality because reality is just becoming too absurd or too ridiculous.
Yeah,
you as a satirist, how do you experience it in terms of just the wacky things of like America having a reality show host as a president? Just as an example.
You know, it's interesting. This is you're touching on a very interesting aspect, because a lot of my work now, Ernst, is not really absurd anymore. It might have been absurd a few years ago, like when George Bush was still president, and perhaps when Thabo Mbeki was president. But now I feel like I'm simply replicating reality. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating because I can't go more absurd, because everything that I stand for is what I'm putting into my work. There's no ambiguity. And normally, you know, satirists are about ambiguity and all kinds of sort of poetic license. But these days, I'm just pissed off at everything. I'm very angry at where everything is going. Everything the government does is wrong. And so my work is merely a representation of my anger.
Right. But I think from negativity sprouts comedy. It's almost in a twisted fashion. I think the old saying goes, comedy is just tragedy plus time. And I think that's what we're seeing here, is that when you joke about something, it's almost like a coping mechanism for a lot of people. Like, I mean, let's condense. Let's condense some of your cartoons into just the very base message. I think if you condense your cartoons into the most basic message, it's pretty much South Africa is in a shit position, and there's a lot of fucked up shit going on. And
that's pretty much my message. and remember, no, but hang on, remember something. A lot of people think that that because I'm full of criticism, I must now give solutions. No. In fact, if you look up the Wikipedia definition of satire, you'll see that it even says that satire is not about giving solutions. It's simply about criticizing or ridiculing the status quo. I'm not here to give solutions. That's not my job. I'm paid to criticize mediocrity. And yes, the important thing, I'm not criticizing or ridiculing excellence, Ernst. I'm taking stabs at what I think is bad decision making, is bad commentary, is bad. Everything that I think is not excellent, I'm taking a stab at. Because think about it, why would I ridicule excellence?
Right. No, it makes sense, man. But then on that specific note, I think something else that I've been actually wanting to ask you is that you've become the skeptic of South African Twitter. I don't think there's a mainstream narrative that you are not skeptical about, whether that be climate change or the experts giving their opinions on the virus. So the thing about being a skeptic on Twitter is, I really want to know where the skepticism comes from. Is that something that recently happened? Is that what drives this inherent skepticism within you, being let's say a commentator, if you will?
Yeah. So, okay, it's a great question. So about 2016, I had my Damascus moment, if you will. So 2016.
Elaborate on that. We've got time.
Yeah. So 2016, my wife, who wasn't my wife at the time, we were living in sin. But we lived in Mossel Bay for a year, and it was one of the greatest moments of my life, living in a little small seaside town for a year. And I really, really did a lot of introspection. I I decided to use that time to reevaluate everything I know about myself. It is a very existential time, and let me just say, it sounds a bit hippie-ish, and everyone who knows my persona, I'm not into hippies and all that kind of stuff, but it's very important. It's very important that you can take some time out from the hustle and bustle of urban life, go out into rural life for a while, and just switch off as much as possible for a while, and let that way of life just influence you, and rethink how you view the world around you. And that's what happened. So like I'm that guy who was on the way to Damascus, and I fell off my donkey and it spoke to me, you know. And and it's not a one night thing. It happened over a number of months, but I started thinking, you know, I've been a cartoonist for X amount of years, and I've always tried to be that guy who's ambiguous. Like, I'm going to criticize everybody equally, and I'm not going to take a position on anything. And I can't tell you why. I don't know what the reason is, but I decided, you know, I've had enough of this. I actually want to take a stand. I want to be principled in my stance on a bunch of things. And on the things that I'm not certain about, I will continue learning and evolving. And I decided to find that set of principles or values on which I would ground my work going forward. I lost a lot of contracts, including the Sunday Times at that stage, and I decided now is the time to renew myself. And so 2017 started with a whole bunch of new kind of work. That was where this big change internally happened, and where I started going, you know, I'm not going to accept everything that I am reading. I know that journalists have agendas. I know that politicians have agendas. And I started, you might call it the red pill, where you go, you know what? Instead of seeing the world as I think I'm seeing it, I want to see the world as it really is.
Right.
And that kind of leads one to a sense of cynicism, because you realize that perhaps people have ulterior motives when they write news stories. And guess what? We know it's true. We know that News 24 has an anti-AfriForum agenda, for example. You know?
No, of course. But then, just before I go into my next question, thank you very much for everyone that's already left a like on the stream. We've already had 29 likes. Thank you very much. I definitely appreciate it, and thank you everyone for sharing it, man. I really it makes a difference. But then the question that I have then is, what is in your mind a healthy level of skepticism? I mean, you can't just be a skeptic for skepticism's sake. There needs to be a healthy moderation or threshold of what is. And I mean, a lot of people talk about a healthy sense of critical thinking or skepticism, but what in your mind is that?
I don't know. I mean, life is a journey. So everything that you're going through and that I'm going through is a journey. If we knew the answers, we would apply those answers to our lives. I don't know. Sometimes I'm overly skeptical, and I know that. I think the word is not skepticism. Actually, let's just quickly replace that with cynicism.
All right.
It's not skepticism as much as what it is cynicism. I have this view that people, particularly in politics and the media, have an agenda that revolves around first making money, then telling the truth, and once you can kind of reconcile that, you then have a skeptical view. You go, okay, hang on a second. If they're calling AfriForum a white nationalist or white supremacist group, why are they saying that?
Right.
Because we know that that's not true. So why would they do that? And then you start going, well, okay, you know what? It's written by a particular journalist who has got a particular bias. And then you start breaking things apart. And that's another thing. I've studied a little bit of computer science. And one of the things you learn in studying sort of mathematics, which is a large part of computer science, is that you have to break everything down into its elements. When you break everything down into its elements, it allows you to see a truth that perhaps you might not see So, for example, if you're reading a story on News 24, you might get very flabbergasted by the story, but the moment you know who the journalist is and if they really were on the scene that they're reporting about, etc., 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 you put all those things together, and then you can build a new perception of that particular story. It sounds all very philosophical. I'm sorry about that.
No, man. In my tagline of my channel is this channel is for politics, philosophy, and memes. So
Yeah.
I mean, it only fits that you go into a little bit more of a philosophical angle on it. So yeah, just to look at the chat here, Dagbreker says being too overly skeptical or let me just put that on the screen. Being too overly skeptical or cynical towards opinions could isolate your experience. Back to metaphors then, Law. So
exactly.
I think that's why I asked the question. I think there is a certain line where I don't have a lot of time for people that are just skeptical for skepticism's sake. They just see an opinion that any type of a mainstream opinion, like, oh no, it's mainstream, therefore it's not true.
I agree.
It doesn't really do anything. But here's a question for you, Jerm. Are you friends with other satire cartoonists in SA, or do you guys hang out?
No, we don't hang out, but I am friends with a few. You see, okay, all right, you're touching on something very sensitive now. So the South African cartoonist sort of fraternity is quite small and niche, and for whatever reason, it's a shambles in the sense that it's largely crap, because nobody is wanting to take a stand. They don't want to rock the boat. It's so strange that they want to draw political satire, but they don't want to rock the boat. So they stick with the mainstream narrative, which tends to be very left-leaning and politically correct. Most of the bigger name cartoonists in the country, of which there are very few, tend to stay in the safe zone. So that includes Zapiro. And that includes EWN and ENCA. And I've worked for both EWN and ENCA, so I know how it works. I think the problem is that they want to rock the boat, but they don't, because they don't want to deal with the fallout. And the fallout can mean losing your contract. And a lot of cartoonists have one single contract. They work with one publication and that's it. If they do not have a good run with the editor, they lose their job. I, on the other hand, changed that model years ago, where I realized that I want to work with a number of clients, and I don't really want to work with the mainstream media, because I want to be able to say the kind of stuff that I'm thinking. So I've got a bunch of different clients, all who tend to agree with the stuff that I'm saying. So I don't really have a difficult time saying that kind of stuff. So I find myself being sort of this like isolated cartoonist. And I am isolated because I've been literally removed from various chat groups, because they see me as racist and sexist and all kinds of things. It's funny though, my wife doesn't think that I'm sexist. And, I would suspect that her opinion matters, being a woman. But, a bunch of male cartoonists disagree with her and insist that I'm a sexist and that she's wrong and that she's internalizing her sexism. So why would I want to hang out with cartoonists who think like that?
Right. So Sideline Opinions asks Jerm whether his position on the political compass has changed over the years. I don't know if you've done that test frequently.
Yes. Well, I don't worry too much about that. I'm beyond that. The political compass is a very boring test. It's like basically a 4-quadrant overly simplified test, and I don't buy into that really. Yes, I'm right-wing, and I know that the term right-wing gets associated with being racist and all those sorts of things, and I don't really care. If people are honestly interested in what it means, then we can have a conversation about that, because it certainly isn't what they think it means. It's a lot more nuanced and a lot more deep. Being left-wing actually is quite insulting, and I would hope that nobody in the comments is a left-wing. And there are a number of very good reasons for not being left-wing. But that's also, again, oversimplifying things, because the whole spectrum thing is so complicated. It's not about being left or right. It's also about being up or down, and it's about being in an individualist or an absolutist, and it's it's so complex. It's not this easy sort of dichotomy.
So Christopher Young asking, this is the bombshell question of the night. Conscious Caracal, can you ask Jerm what possessed him to wear that horrifying sweater in his News 24 interviews in 2014?
I wish that video wasn't there.
Have you sent a WhatsApp to Adrian? Maybe ask him to remove it.
I will say this: I was a bit of a lefty at that stage. Remember, I told you I had my Damascus moment in 2016.
Right.
So
this is pre-Damascus.
Yeah. So that News 24 conversation was pre-Damascus moment. It was 2 years before, and I'm very embarrassed by that video. I really, when I'm on YouTube, it pops up in my own feed, and I really hate seeing it. I do not own that jersey anymore, for what it's worth. I don't. I don't. I'm very embarrassed. I don't know what went through me, but I blame the fact that I was a bit of a lefty.
So, just a comment here. Dagbreaker says, "I hold the bright tongs in my right hand." Yeah, man.
Yes,
right.
So do I.
But Jerm, I've heard a rumor that you only turn right even if the GPS says you need to turn left.
I absolutely do. And in fact, even if it means I arrive at my destination 45 minutes late, I will never go left. And Google can get stuffed. She can keep saying go left. I'm going to go right.
Right. So something that I've found interesting about the growing alternative media scene in South Africa, specifically on YouTube, is how people find their niche or what makes their program interesting. Now, you are the host of Jerm Warfare, but if you had to do an elevator pitch to someone on a South African listener on why they should watch Jerm Warfare, what would your synopsis of your program be? What sets it apart from everything else?
I don't think it's necessarily unique. I don't really believe that there's anything unique under the sun. I think that everything is merely an adaptation of something else. If you read Matt Ridley's book, The Evolution of Everything, which I highly recommend, by the way, it's a great red pill book. And I mean red pill in the sense that it challenges you to rethink your position on a lot of things. Ideas are just that. Ideas are also evolve. So Jerm Warfare is not necessarily it's not necessarily unique or original. It's just an adaptation of what everybody else is doing. But it focuses, at least for me, it focuses on ideas, and in many respects, controversial or politically incorrect ideas, or ideas that are not popular.
Controversial is an understatement when you look at some of your guests.
Yeah, and I'm not particularly interested in following the norm. So like everybody, I know what you're referring to. So like David Icke was on my show recently, and he's probably the world's most famous conspiracy theorist. But let's be honest, it's great fun listening to someone like that. But nobody wants to say it out loud, because everybody wants to seem like, oh, I'm that cool, rational person who I'm not going to associate myself with someone who's a conspiracy theorist. Well, guess what? I don't necessarily agree with a lot of what David says, but I tell you what, it's fascinating. And and yes, another thing, Ernst, David doesn't think that he's wrong. So just because you and I think that he's wrong, what gives us that pulpit to say, well, he's an idiot? How do you know? How do you know? Have you taken the time to listen to him? Maybe he is right about a few things, because he certainly thinks he is. So what I want to do is I want to have conversations with people, and to try and figure out how they've arrived at that point. Like, how do they know what they think they know?
Well, I think that's an admirable way of doing it, and I think that's actually something that puts your show makes it unique in a certain sense, even though you don't see it as unique. But then maybe just before I get into this question from Bernard, or not a question but a statement, don't you think it's a pitfall then of your show when you go for talking to absurd people or people that have out there opinions, but then you also talk to serious people like Tim Noakes? How do you balance that? I mean, that would be my big critique in terms of taking your show seriously, is in the fact that you talk to these like absurd people, but then you also talk to very serious people, and then how does your audience draw the line between I'm talking to this guy because he has crazy ideas, or I'm talking to this guy because he has very excellent ideas that I majority agree with?
But that's it. That's exactly it. Because if I were only to focus on people who believe the earth is flat, or conspiracy theorists like David Icke, or the Westboro Baptist Church who openly state that gay people must go to hell, if I only did that, then I would be putting myself into a very particular kind of niche. But I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in all ideas. I'm happy to chat to people from the Church of Satan, as well as a scientist who knows everything there is about COVID-19. The problem, however, is that some guests might not want to come on to my stream to chat to me because they've seen that I've chatted to a guy who believes the earth is flat. But here's the thing, right? Why can't I talk to a flat earther?
Well, I think that's the balance that you, in the end, are going to have to. That's the pretty much all the plates on the sticks that you're balancing there.
Yeah.
But Bernard makes a very interesting point where he says, "How about it's not about left or right, but more about right or wrong people that we need to decide on?" What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, right and wrong are sort of they're moral judgments. So what I think is right, you might think is wrong. Okay. I might find a joke or a cartoon about the Last Supper being quite funny, but someone else might go, you know what, that's blasphemy.
Right.
So those are very much sort of subjective judgments. It's a very difficult thing to know what right and wrong is, which is exactly why a few minutes ago I said that everybody thinks that they are correct. Nobody assumes that they're wrong. I think I'm correct, and you think you're correct about something, and that's why we talk. Because I want to try and convince you that what you're saying might be wrong. And you want to talk to me because you might want to convince me that I'm wrong about something. But somewhere, if we engage on a very adult level, we're going to get to a point where I might go, you know what, Ernst, that's a very good point. I didn't think of it like that. And that's the beauty of conversation. It's so much better than simply going, that guy's an idiot, I'm going to ignore him.
Right. Here's another, actually an interesting question. I'm going to rephrase it a little bit, but Christopher Young asks, can you please ask Jerm which of his guests makes him angry the most, not necessarily their opinions, but I would rephrase it in terms of, have you ever been angry when talking to a guest, like where you really felt infuriated or irritated with the person you're talking to? And who was that, if you can recall?
The guy from Extinction Rebellion and and the Marxist.
The Marxist.
And yeah, I decided to have a conversation with a guy who's openly a massive fan of Karl Marx, who believes that socialism is. Yes, correct. And I think he's a great guy, and I would definitely have a beer with him and definitely hang out with him. I think he is the real deal. He genuinely believes, and that for me is important. He's convicted. He's convicted by what he says. Okay, so that's very important. He's not pretending. He genuinely believes it. But I was angry in my conversation with him because I honestly thought, yes, come on, really? Do you honestly believe what you're saying? And in me, I'm wanting to swear at the guy because I just honestly, truly believe that he's following the wrong direction. And I'm trying to figure out how did he arrive at that? Like something's happened in his life to get him to that point where he believes that. And that's again where I need to then sit back and go, you know what? Just listen and try and understand where he's at. The Extinction Rebellion guy also made me angry just because it's just nonsense.
That's what I wanted to ask, like what pissed you off about him.
Yeah,
So Brett Sussons asks, at Jerm, do you like the American conspiracy theorist Alex Jones?
I do. I'm not going to say anything, but keep an eye on my channel regarding Alex Jones. Wink, wink.
Well, that's a pretty big hint there. Adrian Blom says, I enjoy watching Devin Tracy stuff. I also enjoy Devin Tracy's content. Very high production value. I've been watching for a while, even though I don't agree on his views on religion. I do agree on a lot of his views in terms of just the major issues that a lot of people are debating, specifically the whole right-left thing. Here's another one.
And just by the way, a number of my guests, in fact, the majority of my guests this year have been left-leaning by their own admission. A lot of people say that it's an echo chamber. If your definition of an echo chamber is me having right-leaning people on my channel, the majority of my guests this year have been left-leaning.
Right. Well, I mean, that's already a big thing. I don't think. Well, firstly, I don't really see any alternative media left-leaning guys on Twitter or on YouTube doing what we're doing. No. So that's the first indication. And the second thing is I wanted to say what type of guests are the left-wing guys having on Twitter, on YouTube, and then I realized, but wait, there aren't any left-wing in the South African alternative sphere. But I know why. It's because their views are already being provided by the mainstream. So why do you have to then go out of your way to create your own show if you can already have your views mirrored in the mainstream?
And remember something. Left and right isn't necessarily terribly important. What's more important is about ideas and if they're good or bad ideas, and they need to be battled. But remember something, that there is a shift that's happening. What is classically left is no longer left. It's now being considered right, because this is a weird shift that's happening culturally around the world. What's becoming more and more important, I think, is the battle to actually engage, because what we're seeing now is cancel culture. People who do not like your views, and they happen to be on the left, tend to try and silence people now whose views they don't like, or cancel them, and that's a big problem. And so you're finding people like Sam Harris, who is left-leaning, but he is an ally of right-leaning people, because he's saying, guys, come on, it doesn't matter if we disagree. We need to still engage.
Right. So there's actually a lot of things I want to address in the chat. So here, Jesse Randolph says Ronaldo is left. Well, I'm talking specifically about leftists, like proper left-wing YouTubers. Not about Ronaldo is like left-leaning, but if you look at his views, I mean, he's definitely not a leftist. Like, he's not a proper left.
He calls himself a centrist, but that's also nonsense. And I've told him
he's not a centrist. I would rather think that he leans left, but he's not what I always say is, like, you need to know the difference between a liberal and a leftist. They're not the same thing.
Let me just say for the record, okay, anybody who calls themselves a centrist is talking nonsense. There is no such thing as a middle line. Okay, there is none. I know that it's makes you feel great. It makes you feel
I'm balanced.
It makes you feel complete when you say I'm balanced. Nobody is balanced, and let me tell you why. Because if there's a gun pointed at your head, you're going to choose a side. Okay, and it's very simple. If you understand human nature, and this is part of. I wrote a blog post a few days ago in which I gave 10 books I recommend people read. One of the 3 things I believe people need to focus on is human nature. If you understand human nature, you realize that balance does not exist. We have biases. For example, I'm not bisexual. I do not swing between men and women. I'm biased towards women. Okay? Right. And if you're gay, you're biased towards men. I don't believe you can be both. And all of my gay friends agree with that. Okay? It's human nature to take a side with whatever it might be in life. You take a side. You can't sit on the fence, because sitting on the fence is an artificial construct. It's not natural human behavior. So basically, the whole idea of being centrist is just nonsense. You're going to swing one way or the other no matter what the issue is. The only reason why you're saying you're a centrist because it makes you feel intellectually clever.
I'm a balanced person, and you guys are all going to the wrong sides. I take all the sides into consideration and then condense them into the perfect view. So, onrehabiliteerbare Afrikaner, or Andre, says, "Hallo Rooikat en Kim." So, hello Andre, dankie dat jy ingeskakel het. Here's a comment for you, not a question, Jerm. Bram Sneyman says, Jerm, I enjoyed your coffee chat with Helen. I just cringed when her connectivity broke her stride. With work from home, what do you think would be stumbling blocks and what solutions do you propose? Now, he's talking about a hypothetical situation. He's not talking about something that's happening out there currently. He's talking about a hypothetical situation where we are in some type of government restricted state, if you will.
What? No, we don't have anything like that, Ernst. We're in a very free society right now. We can leave our homes and do what we want. You know, I just got back from walking the dogs, you know. No, look, I don't know. I think that people just need to have better interconnection. You know, the thing with Helen was it's her line, not mine, and there's nothing I can do. I can't make it better. If she has a terrible line, she has a terrible line, and so she just has to upgrade that.
Yeah, well, Sideliner Opinions makes a very succinct point where he says Shaka was a hero for his people and a villain for his enemies, and I can't agree more. I think everyone is the hero in their own story, whether that be an individual or a group of people or a nation, if you will. I mean, ask an American what their role in history is, and they will be the heroes, but ask someone in the Middle East what the Americans represent in history, and they'll say, no, they're the great Satan. So yeah, I think we're coming to the end of the show now. Jerm, I just have a final thing that I wanted to get into, and that is when you look at the alternative media scene in South Africa and how actually the mainstream is kind of imitating what the alternative media has been doing for a long while now in terms of social media interactivity with their fan bases or their listeners. Where do you see the media scene, and that incorporates alternative and mainstream in the future, in the near future, like 5 or 10 years? What do you see happening? Mainstream diminishing, mainstream retaining its position in the media sphere? What do you see in your crystal ball?
I don't know. I suppose alternative media is going to grow in credibility. Right now, we're seen as this little faction of alt-right. I love that term alt-right because people love using it, but they have no idea what it means. And it's meant to be a derogatory thing. And the easiest way to make them not use it is to own it. So you go, yeah, I'm alt-right. Okay, cool. And then they're like, what? But it's meant to be offensive. No, but I'm alt-right. It's what you say I am, so I'm alt-right. What I'm finding is that the more people like you and me and Ronaldo and Ramon and Sichle and so on get into the space of alternative media and use our voices to give an opinion, not just try and be objective, because I don't believe in objectivity really, in that sense. We just give our views. People want to know what we think about stuff because they'll agree or they'll disagree. And then we can maybe learn from one another. That's what the media traditionally is doing wrong. It's telling us what is correct, and then it gets it wrong. We saw it happen 2 weeks ago with News 24 when they published that Bill Gates story.
Right.
The alternative media was already on that.
And now we're living in a time where if you spread news as a regular person, you get locked up in jail. But if you spread news as fake news as a journalist, you just get a slap on the wrist and you just say sorry on social media.
And the beautiful thing about alt media is that it's made people's stories more real. I've got a guy coming on my show on Sunday. He's a good friend of mine. He lives in Taiwan, and he's been living in Taiwan for 15 years, right? He knows what their COVID-19 response is like, which is why he's going to chat to me. Now, this isn't some formal journalistic story. He's literally going to chat to me as a guy on the ground. And that's the beauty of alt media. YouTube, for example, has given us the opportunity just to chat from across the pond and to see what life is really like on the ground. So, like, for example, traditional media has always been sort of at the top of that pyramid, and we've always trusted it. But now it's allowed. Alt media is pushing that pyramid lower down, so a greater number of people are able to share their stories and experiences and facts.
Right. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Jerm. I think that's an excellent way to end it. Just for the people listening on, firstly, thank you very much for everyone tuning in. Thank you for everyone that left a like. Thank you for subscribing if you haven't already. And thank you for the excellent banter that I saw in the chat. Always makes this very interesting. But Jerm, where can people find you? If they, I mean, it's in the vast minority that don't know who you are, but if there's one or two guys that don't know who you are, where can they find you?
JermWarfare.com. Everything's there from Twitter to Facebook to YouTube, the works. Jerm Warfare, JermDraws.com. Well, JermWarfare.com is also my website, but it all goes to the same place. So JermWarfare.com or JermDraws.com. It's the same website.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much for giving us some time today, of taking some time out of your day to come chat to us. It was
I'm going to go watch a movie now.
For me. Excellent.
We're gonna go watch the third of that Divergent series. We've watched them before, but we're doing it again. What was it? It's Divergent, Insurgent, and what was the third one? Can someone remember? I forget what the third one is called, but we're going to go watch that now. I'm going to go get myself a new drink.
All right, excellent. But yeah, thank you very much, Jerm, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And guys, check me on the next one. I'm back to streaming, so I'm going to have some more excellent guests in the future. Cool. All the links to where you can find Jerm are in the description. So just go check that out and have a good one. I think we had an excellent success not talking about the virus. Yeah. All right. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers. Bye.